We are live. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Rebel Roundtable. Happy Friday. And I get to talk about one of my favorite things in the world today, money and banking. And I have Bobby Ramirez here, the concierge banker that we all know and love. And we get to talk about all the things lawyers do and all of the fun banking things that come up. So Bobby, thanks for being here this morning.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's definitely a topic that's gonna be it's gonna be fun to do. Let's do it.
So how give us a little bit of background, like how long have you been in banking and what does concierge banking actually mean?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Jen. Thanks for the opportunity today as well. Excited to kind of hear the feedback from it. The my background it goes back 2003 is when I first started into banking world. Cut my teeth operationally, got into the background of like what makes banks kind of operate on the back end. Knowing your clients, documentation of IDs, etc., all the way through today, which is the private banking world, which I would say I entered when with my old firm, and that was roughly 13 years ago. So been doing that ever since. And really, the kind of the definition of the private banking world and concierge banker kind of tagline that kind of came along with that is having a relationship with my clients, and really anybody that's within the private banking space really kind of embodies that as a professional banker of sorts, and in that financial space being able to guide clients through the complexities of the financial world. It can be very web-like, which we can kind of talk about how it captures some of its prey in that process,
Yeah.
which I'm sure we'll get into. But
Mhm.
it really is, when things are working and things are okay, the financial system seems to be just fine, right? But
Mhm.
it's when things get a little funky, not necessarily, square and obvious, then things go sideways, and it can go sideways pretty quickly.
And having to call an 800 number in a different country is not helpful sometimes, you mean?
Yeah, so that there's definitely a benefit to having 24-hour service around the clock when folks are like myself are sleeping or whatnot.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, having someone that really understands your voice, which brings another aspect into the world these days with
Yep.
AI,
Yep.
but also some very personal details that really can help secure the transactions that you're trying to accomplish,
Mhm.
in a very private way, but also that there is a reason for 800 numbers, but there's also a reason for persons like myself in the professional space for it.
You mean like people who text you and say, I'm buying a car and I need to have my debit card cleared to do the down payment kind of thing?
Yeah, there's things like that, where maybe the daily limit,
Yeah.
there's things that some customers may need $1,000 daily limit,
Right.
right? And that's their normal kind of thing. Maybe they like to deal with cash, or maybe they just don't like to use their debit card that way. They use a credit card, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
there's also some benefits for using a debit card, at whether it's immediate transaction right there on the spot, cash wise, but then having someone like myself on the back end where you can lift the limit to, you know, 20, 30, 50,
Yep.
$100,000 in a given second. And it processes right there on the spot.
It's funny because the whole background of that story was it was after hours. It was like 8 o'clock at night at a car dealership. And if I wrote a check, then they had to wait for the check. Like there was all kinds of things. I'm like, can you take a debit card? And then I texted Bobby and he raised my limit for that and it all worked. So it's just one of those things when you're doing it, you're like, I couldn't have done this if I would have had to call a customer service number and try to get someone to do it. So I think that's kind of the definition of what you do almost.
Yeah, and that's a key point, right? Like the business hours for a person like myself is typically outside of your normal 8 to 5, right?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
we really try to accommodate what the clients are looking for. A lot of clients are really kind of keen on. Obviously, I have a family myself. I have a daughter, and we're running around. So clients are really respectful in the way of like what really is a fire and what really
Yeah.
needs kind of an immediate attention. So we're able to balance it in that way.
But that's because you have a relationship with them. Like they know your
Yeah.
situation and you know their situation. So it's not that you're trying to shuffle thousands of people through a call center.
Yeah, that exactly the point. Yep.
And so, but I've known Bobby for a long time. We've met through networking groups and things like that a long time ago. I don't remember when it was anymore. But we've had discussions over the years of how lawyers often are really smart about whatever their practice area is, but not so smart about banking and money and things like that. What do you see lawyers doing that you're like, what in the world is going on here with your banking? Not
Uh,
dropping any
uh,
names, but like big picture
yeah,
issues. Yeah.
I think, I think, I think it kind of goes with the misconception of, successful people
Yep.
know money or know how to use money or know the methods of managing money.
Yep.
And that's for lawyers, that's for professional services, that's for anyone really with, a a perception of earning high earning income,
Mm-hmm.
or income in general. Their perception is that people know how to manage money, and that's not always truly the case. I've seen and worked with clients that, for specifically going to the law firms and lawyers themselves, where in most cases they are billable hours,
Mm-hmm.
and it involves the notorious capture of the IOTA account
Yep.
and the transfers of earned income versus, unearned income, and is
Mm-hmm.
where I see a lot of the attorneys struggle. And
Mm-hmm.
I say struggle because there's a balance between, running an operation where you're trying to grow a firm and you are also trying to make sure that you get paid, so
Very
you can
important.
so you can actually live on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yep.
Which is the other half of the equation, which is the earned income or earned revenues from said services that they're providing. Where I see a lot of times is that balance as they're growing out or they're getting comfortable with their role is they might bring on a client, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say it's $1,000 retainer, and they might have done some initial work. So let's say $250 in this case, they have $250 transferred to their operating account, which is where they would be able to distribute to themselves for pay, right? Um, Sometimes what happens is they're so in a hurry, they may not have billed the client or may not have actually earned on their system. And
Mm-hmm.
you would be able to speak better to this than I
Yeah.
would,
Yeah.
but they haven't entered that yet, but they know that they've done the work. And then they would transfer, let's say $300 in that instance. Well, that's $50 that is not documented of earned income,
Yeah.
which, according to what I understand of the
Yeah.
the lawyer space, is a no-no.
Mm-hmm. It's a big no-no.
So that ends up what ends up happening in those scenarios for the general world that may be watching this is that the bar association will come in and do an audit, if that continues to be a habit, or they do an audit of these
Yep. The trust
accounts,
accounts. Yeah.
and then it ended up in a bad scenario for the attorneys.
Yeah.
And where I see it happen the most is when, again, either it's a like sole practitioner or maybe a partnership that might have started just recently, and they're kind of getting up and going, they're trying to figure things out,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it's trying to maintain expenses within their
Yeah.
organization, right?
Yeah.
Versus having somebody that's qualified and understands the ramifications and the details with transfers of that nature,
Yeah.
whether it's an outside firm or someone internally, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then giving them access to do it, and it ends up not doing it well.
Yeah, and going negative in the trust account too. I've seen that be a problem. Like in bankruptcy, sometimes I have a lawyer in bankruptcy, and the trust account has been negative at one point. That's a huge, like the bar. There's all kinds of reporting with that, and sometimes it's not necessarily the lawyer's fault. Maybe a check from a client balance kind of thing. But going negative in the trust account, I've seen cause a
Or
lot.
they forgot to register a check that they issued on
Yeah,
that
yeah,
IELTA account as a refund, right?
yeah,
And they
yeah.
quite haven't refilled those coffers yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That has happened as well. But that, and I guess the emphasis really is the management of that money, earned money
Yeah.
is really the crux of what I see a lot of times gets those attorneys and firms in trouble.
Well, on the lawyer side, it's the billing part and the documentation that they get behind on because they're busy and that kind of thing. And so it snowballs into this disastrous thing.
Yeah, because
One thing, yeah,
what I understood is like they know that they've earned it,
they've earned it. Yeah. Yeah. They don't know work.
but it's the background of documenting within their legal system or process, however that is,
Yep.
that is truly the case, and then the dates don't match up.
Yep.
um,
Exactly.
and that's where really things kind of get a little wonky and not so friendly for them.
Yeah. One thing that we've talked, and I've had experience with this too, is the things that banks see that you don't realize that your banks see. And I'm talking about, notices and levies and like the things that you see. What types of things does the bank get notice of that you have to like contact clients about?
um, Tax levies,
Yep.
garnishments of things, legal orders,
Mm-hmm.
to do audits on things.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we would be required to, by order to provide, statements and, evidence, if you would, of, checks that are bouncing, hold money, while there's, tax disputes, for instance, IRS, franchise tax board, you name it. And it really kind of revolves around, when someone possibly is getting sued for some
Okay.
reason, with
Yep.
default of judgments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Litigation in most cases is involved, and then I get looped into that particular picture as a person of the bank
Yep.
that has to actually submit it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also like I don't really have the option to not do it. So then, it, what
Yes.
happens
It's
is,
like you can't just
what
make
ends
an
up happening
exception.
is we end up having to honor the order, but this might be the difference between someone like myself and others, is that at least the client's going to get a phone call,
Right. Yep.
right? Because the typical standard in those scenarios is that the bank just has to notify you, and
Mm-hmm.
that notification is typically and most commonly used as a mailer,
Yep.
which is USPS mailing something out to the client, firm, lawyer, and then by the time you know it, you know, 7 to 10 days has
Yep.
passed, because
That's
now
fine.
it's in the mail. You go
Yep.
check your mailbox, call it once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks if it's a business office.
Yep.
So now you have checks, payments, everything else in that process, and you really wouldn't have known without a phone call from myself, to help you expedite that resolution.
Yeah, and I see a lot where people's account gets frozen and you see a levy against it by logging into your bank account. And you're like, I don't know what this is. And you have to call the bank and get the runaround and try to figure it out. So having a phone call when that happens is helpful to get in front of it. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And sometimes there are mistakes too, but the bank can't make that determination. The bank has to do what the order says. And so I get people like that too. But this is a mistake. I'm like,
yeah. That's a really good point, Jen, because what happens is there's payment plans a lot of times in place,
yep,
where, oh, like I made a payment arrangement, and we were working through changing it, or we're
yep,
working through, a new payment schedule, or whatever that background aspect of it is,
mm-hmm,
results in the bank still having the requirement to act. And
right.
that's a really good point, because we can make that phone call, and there's usually, a grace period of days between when we levy
Yeah,
or
like 10 days or
withhold,
something. Yeah, yeah,
and then when we actually disperse.
yeah,
And if we can capture it in time,
yeah,
usually the client can resolve it, and then we then get a release of that
yeah,
request, and then the funds are back in place. But um, if it was simply by mail, once again, you're beyond the grace.
yeah,
Therefore, you're now fighting to get the money back, which
yeah.
could be detrimental to an operation.
Yeah, and that's why it's hard when you get that frozen notice, not having someone to call. You have to do the runaround and try to figure out, I
Yeah.
only have 10 days to do this. Because you all think that I'm just a bankruptcy attorney, but this happens a lot, not just to like bankruptcy attorney clients. This happens to professional services firms. It happens to a lot of businesses. If you think you're alone, you're not.
Yeah, definitely not alone. They do happen, and it can be substantial.
Yeah.
If you're trying to grow and operate, and then you get a tax levy or a garnishment of some sort, $100,000, because of fees and everything due,
Yeah.
and you have not that in the bank
Not
account,
$100,000 in the bank. Yeah. Yeah.
then your entire operating is gone.
Yeah.
So it does happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that also goes to don't put your head in the sand. Like you cannot, like if you're in those types of environments, you cannot afford to put your head in the sand to avoid it, because
Yeah.
ultimately you will get to my desk and then it's not good at that point.
And that's a really good point because that is human tendency is to ignore something until you can't ignore it anymore. And by then you have way fewer options. So
Yep. Yep.
yeah. One thing we've also talked about in the past is like there's a lot of firms that are merging, partners buying in, partners buying, going out of things that there's a lot of movement going on these days. What are you seeing on the banking side? What are they not planning for on those kinds of things?
Yeah. So, there was a really big one that bought away just within the last 2 3 days
Mm-hmm.
from it was a 34-person firm that got bought away from another firm recently.
Okay.
And within those, there's lines of credit typically used. There's partnerships, buy-ins, buyouts, that need to take place. And what a lot of folks really don't realize is that a lot of that requires personal guarantees or business guarantees of some sort, which pulls back to your capital position,
Right.
right?
Okay.
Understanding like how your strength of your balance sheet really impacts your ability to launch or to grow. And you know credit plays a factor into that, right? How well you've managed that particular process of things, that's important. Your balance sheet, where your debts and liabilities, and also your reserve capital, whether that's non-secured, non-retirement type assets. A
Okay.
lot of people think, oh, I got $100,000 sitting in my retirement account. You can use that, and retirement accounts, unfortunately, as Jen, are a protected class of asset. So
Mm-hmm.
when banks look at it, it's not the same.
Yeah.
It can be considered some form of reserves, but it's very, very restrictive. So looking at your balance sheet, making sure that it's positioned in a way where you're able to leverage it to secure debt that's going to be
Right.
needed. Yeah.
Yeah. Having a line of credit. Do you recommend that law firms have an available line of credit usually
Yeah, in most
for they
cases,
need
what
it?
happens, the businesses and law firms that typically come on board, they
Mm-hmm.
usually would look for some form of line of credit, even if it's small. It doesn't
Yeah.
really need to be a whole lot, because again, you run into where cases are, ebbs and flows of cases where you might need to be able to draw on it for a capital need, whether it's a sign-on bonus, right, for an up-and-coming attorney that you want to capture out of law school or whatever it may be, but also the
Mm-hmm.
ramp-up period for that particular, new law firm person, right? There's going to be a ramp-up, and then a lot of times when they're bringing on existing talent, where they're bringing on, a tenured attorney, usually there is a bonus structure in place that for them to come on board for you, because they're migrating to a
Yeah.
new firm. They need to also ramp up. So those lines of credit really do kind of come in handy.
Mm-hmm.
Another component would be taxes. They again, like
Texas. Yeah.
versus using your operating capital that you would use to run your business. You would use a temporary line of credit to be able to bridge those payments over a period of time.
Yeah.
Again, going back to managing enough credit, you know, making sure that it's done responsibly and that you're aware of what you can and can't afford.
Well, and that's also one of the things with speaking of taxes and not to get too far into the accounting and lending side, but when people are trying to buy a house, but their tax returns show that they make no money because they own a business and they've written it like it's one of those things where you have to really plan ahead for.
Yeah, I mean, deductions are great. I mean, and not paying the taxes is a benefit of doing that.
Yeah.
Um, but the flip side of that is there is the other half of the coin
Hmm.
is it really does limit your ability to borrow,
Yeah.
which will ultimately get in the way of growth at some point in time.
Yeah.
Um, banks want to make sure that there's a secondary source of repayment. So we're looking at making sure that the business can sustain itself with its operating model as it is.
Hmm.
If we're looking through the schedule, and we won't go through too much of this, but if we're looking through the schedule of expenses and they seem really normal
Hmm.
of normal business expenses, then that's going to tell the bank, well, that means that that's what you're really needing to operate,
Hmm.
and that
Yep.
really is your amount of leftover cash. And that doesn't always fare well when you're looking at buying the California home,
Right.
right? Uh, I would say California Bay Area home or Southern California home.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah, it's so interesting to me because it's one of those things we have to almost plan a couple years ahead and plan the taxes for it to be able to, or have other things that you can leverage as far as lending
the
goes.
other part of that, Jendo, that a lot of folks don't really think about at the front end of that, it's the back end too, when they're
Hmm.
looking at exiting the business.
Okay. Yep.
Right? They, writing everything off, the business is not really making a lot of money, so when they're looking at, potentially exiting the business and they're transferring that over to the person that's doing their due diligence,
Yep.
what money are you really making?
Well,
So there's another component there that a lot of folks really miss.
and I find a lot of law firms they tend to think their firm is worth way more than it actually is because they either have been writing everything off or it's all the one owner is the entire, goodwill of the organization. There's no systems, nothing like that. It's just
That is
the,
correct. Yep.
yeah.
The person that's leading the charge or the name that's on the firm is really the 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 reason why the income is coming in,
Yeah.
and there's no
Yeah.
real systems in place to scale it out or be useful after the fact.
Yep. Sorry, everyone. I'm still preaching to the choir about systems and resale and things like that. Even from a banking standpoint, Bobby, you and
Yes,
I have over the years, like, slightly ranted just about human psychology when it comes to money and the burying the head in the sand. Does that spread across like professionals too? Because I think people have this misconception that everyone has their shit together. And you see the backside of that. Does everyone really have their shit together?
no, no.
See, I just want people to know that like you have to ask good questions and you have to have a good banker willing to work with you, but not everyone has this all together from day one.
you know, it's funny. And I will forever remember this day, and goes back to one of the very early remembrances of my career,
Hmm.
and I will never forget it because of how it transpired. So I'll give you a kind of just a real life example of what happened
Yeah.
and what people perceive as money. There was This was down in the Central Valley at the time, and this gentleman would come into the bank and reek of his ranch, and it was cattle, right? So, and he was dirty from head to toe.
Hmm.
His work truck was probably 3 decades old,
Yep.
you know beat up. And I at the time I went and I would shake his hand, say hello. And, being a farmer myself, it wasn't really a big deal that that was his approach. And he just kind of looked at me and paused, and he's like, "Man, I'm dirty, like, you don't want to shake my hand." I was like, I mean, it's fine, right? um,
Just some dirt.
yeah, he's in his overalls, he's covered,
Yeah.
and everything else that you would think of for a cattle rancher. And you know nobody really realized how wealthy this person is.
Hmm.
And he was sitting on over a few thousand acres of land that was really really priced to change his life.
Yeah.
And in the bank account, only several, let's say several zeros on the particular account and nowhere near what he really was worth.
Yeah.
Um, and then, flash forward, you can go into the other half of the story of, watching the person walking in with a nice, pinstripe suit with, pocket squares and, the
Yep.
nines, and
Yep.
driving around in a brand new Bentley,
Yeah.
right? And when I look at the overall balance sheet, kind of going back to the conversation a little earlier, is completely upside down,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, in those times, it usually leads to when spending is beyond what they're able to maintain,
Yep.
and then ultimately at some point I would end up with a garnishment or a levy, for back taxes that have not been filed, or um, surprisingly, even like child support also kind of
Yes.
plays into some of those pictures. Um, you know, Spousal support is also another component that kind of plays into some of those pictures.
Okay.
But not just because they're dressed to the nines doesn't necessarily mean that there's things put together.
Yeah, looks are very deceiving. And a lot of times the keeping up with the Joneses are the broke ones, or the Joneses are broke because everyone's trying to keep up with them and their borrowing.
Yeah,
So yeah.
that's a funny thing. You can leverage and you can do a lot of great things, but it you ultimately have to report it at some point.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's really on a balance sheet, and
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
Anything else that you would like lawyers and professional services to know about banking in general that we haven't ripped
Yeah, I
it?
think the opportunity. It really just kind of begs the opportunity. Really is understanding like where your finances are,
Yeah.
and having the professionals around you that can really kind of help support and grow your overall portfolio. And I
Yeah.
would say portfolio not in the typical sense of, oh, your stock portfolio, your bond
Right.
portfolio. Like you're talking your
Whole thing.
overall picture for your household and your business.
Yeah.
And in doing so, like leverage those that are doing it on a daily basis. There's a lot of times where folks will say that, oh yeah, like I help, attorneys, but then you go look at a legal document and they're like, y- you can see it.
Yeah.
It's almost
Yeah.
immediate. Like I don't
Yeah.
know like what's a respondent, what's a plaintiff, what's a, etc.
They don't
What's
know
a
any of that
voter.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't really understand what some of that is, and that should be telling signs for who you're working with. And then on top of that, referrals are a key component.
Yeah.
Understanding your network, ensuring that the people that you're engaged with really do understand what it is that you do and how you do it. There's a lot of talk within the industry of, oh, private banking this, private banker that, relationship manager this, relationship manager that, and I can do it all,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, well, the bank can do it all, and I'm the one person that can help you.
Yeah.
Um, I'll be the first to say I don't do it all. There are certain industries that I do not touch, and I very much vocalize that to my clients or my referral sources that it's not really beneficial to you as a referring person or the client themselves to come on board with me because I can't get them from A to Z.
Right.
Um, I can only maybe do A, B, and C because those are foundations no matter what business entity that we're dealing with. But to
Mhm.
really help them grow and to really expedite their path, I just wouldn't be able to do it. So being
Yeah.
honest with that is a really big challenge in the industry of what the capabilities of the individual are. Um, you know, Everybody can work in a team, so there might be a team component
Yeah. Yeah.
where they might bring someone in, but that should be the case. It should be a team approach where you referred it to me, but I'm bringing in John or Jane to
Yeah.
the particular situation that expert like that's their expertise, and
Yeah.
that should be normal. And unfortunately, that's not.
Yeah, I feel like too many lawyers go and sign up with whatever bank on the website. Like, you know what I mean? They set up the account, not thinking through like your banker can actually be a really good source of um, information service, but also the network of the banker can be very helpful too when you need something done somewhere
But
else.
even on that, Jen, like just with that comment by itself,
Yeah,
right? Like just walking
I
into
do.
the regular banks,
Yeah,
um, how many times I see statements from folks and they're not done right.
Hmm.
The vesting, meaning the titling of the account, is wrong.
Wrong. Yeah.
Who owns the account is not accurate.
Hmm.
When it comes to referring like trust accounts, for instance, they would put John and Jane Doe as the owner, and then they would put the trust as the beneficiary. Like, that's not the same,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And in the law firm space, making sure whether it's the law firm doing, holding the account, or whether it's the person's holding the account, makes a big difference. And I see that often too.
Done wrong all the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
because
Yeah.
again, it goes back to the comment a little earlier. If they're working in that space on a regular basis, they would know right out the gate.
Yep. As
Or
someone who's had a trust account set up wrong, yes, they didn't know how to do it, and that's, yeah, very frustrating. Not by
yeah, or
you.
they have
It
to
was
go to their they have
yeah,
to go to their legal department.
yeah, exactly. They can't answer the questions. So
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Well, we probably got on for too long because this is longer than I normally do. But
Uh,
are you on LinkedIn? Can people find you on
LinkedIn,
LinkedIn?
yes. Please
Yeah.
find me on LinkedIn. Bobby Ramirez is. You can search me, find my
Okay.
picture. It's up to date. Yeah. Find
You got
Jen, find me.
the
You're good.
gray. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got your updated
Yeah.
headshot on there.
You need to get that updated headshot.
Okay, so on the Rebel Roundtable, we do have a Spotify playlist of like our favorite like songs to rebel against society. Do you have a song that you like to blast?
I'm horrible at music themes and movies. I wouldn't be able to tell you, Jen.
That's funny.
Pick one for me, and I'm sure
That's
you'll find
fine.
it appropriate.
Well, I have all kinds of songs on there, and plus, when we go anywhere together, I'm in control of the radio anyway. So
This is true.
this really is true. Well, thank you for talking about lawyers behaving badly with banking and money, and
Thanks
hanging
for
out with
having
me
me.
on Friday morning. So
Yeah, thanks
thanks,
for having
everyone.
me. Thanks.
Yeah, and next
Thanks.
week, check out Rebel Roundtable. It's actually, I put myself on the hot seat to give you my top 10 hot takes for 2026 with lawyers. So that's